200,000 years ago, the Earth was crowded with human-like species. Today, there is only us. We are the sole survivors of a long, brutal, and often bloody evolutionary game of musical chairs. Imagine walking through the African savanna or the frozen forests of Europe 30,000 years ago. You would not be the only human in the woods. You might encounter a Neanderthal, stout and muscular, built for the cold. You might run into a Denisovan, mysterious and wide-ranging. You might even stumble upon a hobbit-like Floresiensis on an island in Indonesia. But if you look around today, the woods are empty, the caves are silent. We are the last ones standing. How did we do it? Was it intelligence? Was it violence? Or was it just blind, dumb luck? To understand our survival, we first have to admit that for most of our history, we were not the dominant species. For millions of years, hominins lived in small, isolated pockets. We were prey. We were scavengers. We were struggling to make it through the winters. We were not the masters of the planet. We were just another branch on a very messy family tree. About 300,000 years ago, Homo sapiens emerged in Africa. We weren't necessarily stronger than the Neanderthals. We weren't necessarily faster than the Denisovans, but we had something different. We had a social toolkit that allowed us to scale in ways no other species could manage. The first secret to our survival was our ability to engage in Dunbar's number. British anthropologist Robin Dunbar theorized that there is a limit to how many relationships a primate can maintain. For most apes, that number is about 50. For early humans, it was closer to 150. But Homo sapiens developed language that allowed us to gossip, to form alliances, and to build reputations. We didn't just know who was in our immediate circle. We knew who was in the group that knew the group that knew the group. This allowed us to organize into tribes of hundreds or even thousands. Neanderthals lived in small, tight-knit family units of maybe 10 to 20 individuals. When times got tough, they had nowhere to go. They were stuck. When we faced a drought, we could call on a network of distant cousins who lived 5 valleys over. We had a social safety net. They had a bunker. But it wasn't just about playing nice. There is a growing body of evidence suggesting that we didn't just outcompete our cousins, we actively replaced them. Look at the DNA. If you have European or Asian ancestry, you carry between 1 and 4% Neanderthal DNA. This tells us a fascinating story. It tells us that we didn't just kill them off, we interbred, we absorbed them, we swallowed their genetic legacy as their populations dwindled and ours exploded. By about 40,000 years ago, the climate began to shift violently. The Ice Age entered a period of rapid, erratic fluctuation. One year, the tundra was lush. The next, it was a frozen wasteland. Neanderthals were hyper-specialized hunters. They were built to hunt megafauna like mammoth and bison at close range. They were the ultimate heavyweight fighters, but they were slow to adapt to a changing environment. We, on the other hand, were the ultimate generalists. We had the projectile weapon advantage. Neanderthals used heavy, thrusting spears. They had to get right in the face of a giant beast to make a kill. That meant broken bones, torn muscles, and high mortality rates. We developed the spear thrower, or atlatl. We developed bows and arrows. We could hunt from a distance. We could kill without dying. This technological leap was paired with a massive cognitive shift. Archaeologists call it the Upper Paleolithic Revolution. Around 50,000 years ago, we see an explosion in symbolic thinking. We see beads, we see cave paintings, we see musical instruments. Why does this matter for survival? Because art is a proxy for communication. When you paint a bison on a wall, you aren't just doodling. You are creating a shared reality. You are creating a myth. Humans are the only species that can cooperate in large numbers based on shared myths. A Neanderthal couldn't be convinced to die for a flag. A Neanderthal couldn't be convinced to share his kill with a stranger because they both believed in the same spirit animal. But we could. We could use religion, stories, and symbols to bind millions of people together under a single identity. We could trade obsidian from 300 miles away. We could plan migrations based on astronomical cycles. We were the first species to live in the future. While the Neanderthals were focused on the next kill, We were telling stories about the ancestors who came before us and the gods who would provide for us tomorrow. That long-term planning, fueled by our social complexity, created a buffer against the cruelty of nature. But let's talk about the dark side of this story. The competitive exclusion principle in ecology states that two species competing for the same resources cannot coexist indefinitely. Eventually, the better adapted one will drive the other to extinction. We were the better adapted ones, not because we were better, but because we were more efficient at stripping the landscape of resources. By 30,000 years ago, the Neanderthals were effectively gone. Their populations had shrunk into isolated refugia in the Iberian Peninsula. They were starving. We were thriving. We had more people, more food, and more trade routes. We didn't need to commit genocide to win. We just needed to outbreed them and out-eat them. We occupied the caves they left behind. We hunted the animals they relied on. We didn't win because we were evil. We won because we were the most efficient resource processing machines the planet had ever seen. And then there's the metabolism factor. The human brain is a massive energy hog. It accounts for about 2% of our body weight, but consumes 20% of our daily caloric intake. This is an evolutionary nightmare. It is risky. It makes childbirth dangerous. It makes infants dependent on parents for years. But our brain allowed us to cook. Cooking is one of the most underrated inventions in history. By applying heat to our food, we externalized digestion. We broke down fibers and killed pathogens before the food even hit our stomachs. This allowed us to have smaller guts, which saved energy. That saved energy was redirected to our brains. Other species didn't master fire to the same extent. They spent their days chewing through raw, tough proteins. We spent our days processing energy and using that energy to think, plan, and socialize. We became the ultimate survivors because we outsourced our survival strategies to culture. If a wolf wants to survive, it has to evolve claws and teeth over 1 million years. If a human wants to survive a blizzard, we just build a coat. If a human wants to hunt a mammoth, we don't grow longer arms, we build a trap. We stopped evolving physically and started evolving culturally. That speed of change is exponential. Think about the last 10,000 years. We went from nomadic hunters to farmers, then to city builders, then to nuclear engineers. We have essentially bypassed the slow, grinding pace of Darwinian selection. But this brings us to a terrifying question. If we are the last of our tribe, what happens if the tribe fails? We have organized ourselves into a single global species. There are no other human subspecies left to compare ourselves to. There is no one else to step in if we mess up. When the Neanderthals died out, there was a backup, us. We are now the only ones with the cognitive capacity to manage the planet. We have replaced the entire complex web of diverse hominin evolution with one single massive monoculture. We are hyper-connected. We are highly fragile. If we look at the extinction of the Neanderthals, the Denisovans, and the Floresiensis, we see a pattern. They were all small populations in changing environments. They were specialized. Are we any different? We have built a civilization that is highly specialized in fossil fuels, global trade, and complex infrastructure. We have become our own version of the hyper-specialized hunter. We are the most successful species in the history of life, yet we are also the most vulnerable to the consequences of our own success. The history of the last 200,000 years is a story of narrowing. It is a story of many ways of being human, being condensed into one. We survived by being the best at everything, the best at networking, the best at resource extraction, the best at telling stories that keep us together. But as we look toward the future, we have to ask ourselves if that same drive, the one that allowed us to inherit the earth, might eventually lead us to the same fate as our cousins. We are the last of the tribe. We are the ones who made it through the ice. We are the ones who survived the collapse of every other human species. The question isn't how we won. The question is, now that we are alone, can we keep going? Or are we just the final act in a very long, very successful play that is about to come to a close? We are the only ones left to answer that, and that is perhaps the heaviest burden any species has ever had to carry.